Welcome to the Play for Peace podcast, where conversations bridge divides and build unity. Here we create a safe space to learn from diverse perspectives, no matter your political stance. Together, we'll explore common ground, foster understanding, and strengthen connections between communities and law enforcement. Let's stand together for peace, progress, and purpose. We are all on the same team.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wealth Building Project podcast in partnership with the Play for Peace Initiative. I am your host, Markel Blunt, and with me is my co-host, the Jeffrey Venter. How you doing, Jeff?
Man, I'm good, man. I'm excited about today.
Perfect.
Let's get it.
Our next guest, retired law enforcement officer out of New York City. He's a 9/11 first responder. He received his degree in criminal justice from St. John's University in NYC. He's the co-founder of the Verdi EcoSchool, a one-of-a-kind urban farm school located in Melbourne, Florida, and is founder of Hey Blue, an interactive approach to creating meaningful connections between police officers and the communities they serve. He has been honored by Melbourne Citizen of the Year in 2022 and nominated by the Space Coast Black Chamber of Commerce for Humanitarian of the Year in 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the John Verdi. John,
whoa.
Welcome to the podcast, sir. Welcome.
Thank you so much, man.
Standing O, so I'm gonna give it to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Markel, it's a pleasure to meet you. Jeff, absolutely pleasure to meet you both. Thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. Well, let's dive right in, man. There's so much to talk about. I like to start off with, at the end of the day, what's the catalyst? You've done a lot of different things. Obviously I'm starting off in law enforcement, but, what was the catalyst? Give us a little bit of background as to, being in New York, what was that about and how long you were there, and then making the move to Florida and getting started with the school and obviously in Hey Blue.
Yeah, so that's a long story. I'll try to give you the 30,000 foot view, and if you want to break down into it, we can. But I started in a law enforcement home in Brooklyn, New York. My dad was a cop. Went to St. John's University. Studied criminal justice. Decided to become a cop on my way to being a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer, and then. Very long story short, 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened at the time, I was actually an undercover for the NYPD. I was a vice undercover, which was like one of the coolest jobs ever. On 9/11, I was there for the majority of what happened. And amidst the chaos, right? Amidst all of the death and there's just the absolute horrors of that day.
Yeah.
Something happened in my brain where it started defaulting to the positives that I was seeing. And when I say the positives, it was like, look, as a NYPD officer, my job was to rush in and save people. My job was to get as many people out as I could. And when I looked to my left, I saw firemen that have the same job, man. They're doing the same thing. Let's get you out. I looked to the right, I saw EMS workers. They're triaging people, they're getting people out. But the most important thing that I saw that day was community members, just like you, just like everybody else. Like they were running out, right? There was a lot of people running out.
Yeah.
But there were also people coming up to me and saying, how do I help? How can I help? Let's go. We have to save this person, or I see this or that. And so that gets lost in that conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so my journey through reflection of that day and subsequent days afterwards about how policing and how police and community relations plays such a huge key role in every community as a small community, the smaller community, but also as the larger community. It showed me that we can work effectively, work together to help each and every community everywhere across the United States, because a lot of the problems are the same. I should say they are similar, and that we can, through open dialogue, through finding, through empathy, through design thinking process, we can identify these key ways that we can pull police resources, community resources, and people resources to actually go in and target the main issues and work towards solutions together. So, I like my whole platform and everything that I'm about is about one-on-one personal connection. Okay. As a police officer, I saw that the more that I connected with members of my community, especially the members of my community that did not look like me. I started in Coney Island in 1997. And if you know anything about Coney Island, it's shaped like a T. And if you make a right into the T, the majority of the community is black and brown. If you make a left on the T, it's they call it Little Odessa, so it's mostly Russian, right? So not many, not a high volume of people that speak English as a primary language, right? Okay. And so when I started realizing, I started connecting with my community, I started understanding number one, it made me a better police officer, right? I was able to disseminate and get information out to people that needed it. And that information it's not necessarily about like tattling or ratting or any of that kind of stuff. It's more about like resources, the needs of who needs what and what resources are out there that we can allocate to people to help them, right? And then the second thing is like the more that I interacted with the community, the more I got to know them. Honestly, it's the less likely that I wanted to hurt anyone in my community and in their worst times of need, right? And so here's a perfect case in point in that. There was a time, and I know if I'm going a little bit long, you can stop me. I'm long-winded, but
this is for you, man.
All right,
keep it moving.
Yeah. So there I was as a rookie. I got into a bunch of trouble because I really wasn't that great on the radio, right? Like I made a mistake, and so as a punishment, they put me onto the area where mostly everybody speaks Russian, right? And they say, hey, kid, get out there and go find there's a person that's doing pickpockets. Get out there during a day tour and find us this pickpocket. And I said, okay. I don't even know. I have no idea, bro. Honestly, I'm like, okay, whatever.
Thank you.
I'll go find a needle in the haystack. You got it, bro. So here I am, and I'm walking up and down Brighton Beach Avenue, and all the stores are in Russian, and I start going into the stores. And one of the Russian police officers, they told me, when you go in, just say "Privyet," which means hello. And I said, okay, yeah, no worries, man. So I walk in, and I look around, and I'd say "Privyet," and I'd wave at everybody. And they would never say "Privyet" back. They would say this phrase. And I had no idea what they were saying. I couldn't even regurgitate it back to anyone. And I would just wave and walk out. And I would go into every single store. And every single store I'd walk in, I'd say "Privyet." And every single store, or the majority of the stores, they would tell me this phrase. And then I would keep it moving, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was there for a solid week. I didn't catch the pickpocket. And they cycled me back into patrol, and here I am going on radio runs, right? And so about a week after that, we get a radio run where it's an assault in progress, right? So we fly over there, and it was an assault with a weapon. So as we come pulling up to this parking lot, I want you to imagine one of those old school boxy Mercedes-Benz S500s. You know what I'm saying? When we were growing up, you saw they had those big deep dish hammer rims. You were just like, whoa, that's the ish right there, right? and so we come pulling up on one of those, and there's an older man, an older Russian gentleman. He's on the other side from us, so he's on the passenger side, and we're pulling up on the driver's side. Think of it like a T-bone kind of. And he's on the other side, and you see him hitting a woman through the glass with those steering wheel clubs, those metal clubs.
Yeah.
And he's going to town. He's whacking us. So by the time we jump out of the car and say, police don't move, we pull out our guns, right? Mm-hmm. And when I did that, he looked at us and he wound up for that final, whatever this woman did or whatever this attitude that this guy had, he was about to finish her off.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to squeeze the trigger to take that man's life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear to you that the only reason why I stopped, and when I say to you, when I stopped, I stopped for a split second, was because I recognized him as one of the store owners that I would go in from. And I said, as I started to squeeze the trigger, I stopped and I said, holy shit. I'm sorry if I'm cursing on anything.
Nah, that's fine.
Holy shit. And then in the time that I stopped and I said, holy shit, recognizing this guy, he was like this and he dropped it behind his back. And he turned his hands like this. And so that man lived that day.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, in my retrospect and in mind and body, as we've talked about in the past, like I understood that it was only through familiarity that gave me that split second. And so if I can create that split second for police officers across the United States and around the world,
that's deep.
How many lives would we save?
Wow.
So that's the core premise behind Hey Blue, using technology to get people to be in front of each other, to start building one-on-one connection. And so so I'm going to stop there. There's a whole other. I know you talked about the school, and I know I just unloaded a lot on y'all.
We'll get to that too. That's really powerful. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. One of the things that when I think about how I grew up, right? So I grew up. I'm a city kid. Jeff and I grew up in the same neighborhood. We both went to school out in the suburbs as part of a program called MECO, and that gave us tremendous amounts of opportunity in our lives, and good sports and good people, and just like they're like family today. But I never had bad interactions with police. I spent most of my time in a good area, in a good neighborhood. And so when as we start to have video cameras in our pockets, when we start to see the videos on social media, I have a hard time sometimes relating, because I'm like, just like be nice and put a smile on your face and say, hey, was I speeding? Like, whatever the interaction is, try to keep it light, keep it going. But there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of anger out there, and a lot of mistrust,
a lot of trauma.
And so one of the things I thought about was, I love your opinion on this, but one of the things I was thinking was, hey, police officers are human beings, and many of them are serving really difficult areas. And over time, there's, I believe, a natural bias sometimes of what you may be doing. So if it's an inner city community that's predominantly Black, and you spend 10 years and it's a quote unquote war zone, there's going to be some natural tendencies and biases, not to mention trauma for the police officer who's going through that, whether it's, post-traumatic stress, right?
Sure.
And I think there's sort of a lack of training. Have you, while you were a police officer, do you have that same, is that an accurate maybe sort of description or feeling about this?
God, absolutely. So I'll point to a specific instance. I love telling stories, but actually as a rookie, responded to the Black and brown side of another assault where gang members, they caught a kid that wasn't supposed to be around there, and they picked up a brick, and that brick was like kind of sliced on an angle, like in half. And when they hit this kid, they hit him in the head, and they kind of scalped him. And this kid was like, the top of his head was flapping off, right? It was gross. So sorry if anyone's listening that's gonna get sick, but when we responded, I was not the first cop on the scene. I was like the 6th or 7th cop on the scene. And the cops were so frustrated because it was a gang thing that they didn't address helping the kid. And so when I got there and I looked at them, and here's this kid laid out, and his literally half of his head is like flapping open. I jumped on the kid and I started compressing his head down.
Mm.
And when I did that, they were like, "Why are you doing that? Are you crazy? Like, it's a gang kid. Like, what is it? What, who gives a shit?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. And I'm standing there and I'm on top of him holding his head together because I know, right? Like, you got to compress the wound, right? So here I am, and I'm compressing the wound, and EMS gets there. They take him, obviously trauma, all that kind of stuff. Saved the kid's life, right? The kid survived that day.
Yeah.
Okay. And I turned, and when they took the kid off, everything was covered in blood, right? I had this kid's blood everywhere.
Yeah.
And the cops were just like, "Well, now you got to go to the hospital and you got to get an exposure form, and you got to do this and you got to do that, and if this kid dies, now you gotta do these vouchers and blah blah blah." And I'm looking at them and I'm going, "Yo, there was a kid dying here. Like, who cares about a uniform? Who cares? Like, I don't know if this kid lives or dies now, but in my mind, I'm like, I did everything that I could, right? And if that was my brother, if that was my sister, if that was my, God forbid, my children, like, I wouldn't want somebody standing over judging him. I want them to help
him.
And when you turn around and you look and you try to dissect why they didn't help, it's because those officers had so many negative interactions with those kids that it actually devalued their life in their view. And it's like, well, hold on a second, man. If we're going to take an honest step back, it's the same thing that's happening to y'all now. Your lives are being devalued, and you're getting pissed off about it because you're like, well, wait a minute. I'm putting my life on the line for this community. And absolutely, you're 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
That, yes, you are stepping up to put your life on the line. And we can talk about that. But I think everybody, the resounding sounds that everybody's talking about is the ultimate value of a life.
Mm.
What is that value? And why do we hold it to such a high regard in some instances and such a low regard in other instances?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about like the effects of PTSD, that's all PTSD, man. That's all trauma that the police officers have had to go through in dealing with, members of the community that are not, let's be honest, they're not community minded.
Mm-hmm.
They're not out there looking for the greater good of their community. They're out there they're surviving. It's about survival. You're in a survival brain state. If anything, you're in an emotional brain state. You're certainly not in an executive brain state. Mm-hmm. And that's both. That's police officers and that's the community members. And that's where like our work comes in to be able to start identifying that and sharing that with the officers and community members and saying, hey, everybody here is in survival mode. How do we start pushing towards a more executive state so we can grow together? Because if we're all going to work together to keep each other safe, that's what we could say is the umbrella of a good community, right? I care about you, you care about me. If we care about each other, we're gonna uplift each other.
Right. That's right.
If we're trying to get to a healthy community, well then, man, we got to talk about how we're going to hold each other accountable. And how are we going to support each other in times where people need help the most?
Yeah.
So I know I went long, man. I'm sorry, man.
Listen, you done just changed everything. I mean, the perspective that you've given us, man, I thank you for that.
Thank you.
P for P, we originated based off of what happened to George Floyd. And as a civilian, I was one of the founders, but it was something different for me. It was, okay, this happened, with George Floyd, and it was I felt as though it was a bad police officer. But I have so many friends and family that have served as a police officer or former police officers. So I was feeling empathy for good police officers. What is, how are they feeling based on what they watched? And so my question to you is like, how did you feel that moment that, when you were watching that? Because you guys obviously now it's escalated, getting that bad rap. And so I'm just, I felt bad for it. So how did you feel about it? How did you when this was happening?
So I got to be honest with you. When I saw that video, I saw two things that nobody wants to see in a police officer that's serving their community: arrogance and indifference. That's what I saw. Excuse me one second. I'm sorry.
No.
Arrogance and indifference. Nobody wants that. And everybody saw that in the look of his face. And it's like, everybody wants an empathetic officer. Everybody wants, and even the good cops, mind you, right? But I think we also have to get back to what is a good cop. All right, so we have to identify that first, right? Because my definition of a good cop and yours, two totally different things. Markel has a different altogether, right? If you look at the metrics of what a good cop is, you talk to a police chief right now and say, "Hey, chief, tell me what a good cop is." He'll say, "Oh, a good cop is a guy that's out there. He made 50 arrests this year. He wrote 200 summonses, blah, blah, blah." You take that crap and you bring it back to the community and say, "Hey, man, did you know that this officer had 50 arrests and 400 summonses? He's a good cop, right?" They'd be like, "Hell no. Hell no." Oh, well, what would you say is a good cop then? A good cop is somebody that leads with empathy, builds connection, and is resourceful. That's in the work that we've done, Hey Blue, and interacting with communities. Those are the first three things that they all say. They have to be great with communication, they have to lead with empathy, and they have to be resourceful. Great. Hey, so I didn't see any of those things from the officers with George Floyd, right? And so when you look at what a good cop is, a good cop is going to hate a guy like that, because guys like that, they just make our jobs 10,000 times harder.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you're just like, the mountain is already super high to climb. And now you just put like another 10, 15, yards each time you guys do something messed up, that I got to go uphill more. And it's horrible. There's no, I know that people talk about the thin blue line or the blue line and all that kind of stuff. There is no greater person in this world that hates a bad cop more than a good cop. Like, you'll hit it like, I don't want to be near that dude, or that dude's mad cringy, or that dude's this, or he's, he comes to my scene, he sets stuff off. I don't want to be anywhere near that dude. Or they'll say, "I want to get this thing done because I hear on the radio that this particular sector car is backing me up, and I want to get this thing done before these dudes get here because these guys are nightmares. Hell no, I don't want them anywhere near my scene." Especially nowadays, like you said, Markel, there's video cameras in everybody's pockets. I'm going to be held accountable. And if I'm going to be held accountable, the last thing I want is some heavy-handed cop coming onto my scene. I don't want you screaming at my people on my scene. The minute you do that, the scene is now yours. I'm stepping back. So,
No, I was just going to say, along those lines, are there any, from your experience at the time anyway, one of the hardest things I think about when we talk about the blue line, right, is, we're in this, we have to take care of each other. And, I call it a brotherhood, but brother and sisterhood. We understand that. Is there any training or regarding, like, when you have the rookie coming in, who, of course, you report up to the sergeant or report up to whoever. That person say, I mean, not that they're not a bad cop, but maybe they're lacking empathy. Maybe they're lacking just because of their experience. I find it difficult for somebody just coming in to speak up and to say something. When we watched the George Floyd situation, you saw a bunch of cops around. You had citizens saying, "Hey, he's on his neck. Like, come on. Like, he can't be like, come on." And there are other police officers who are just kind of standing there. And I find that I think it's easier said than done. It's easier to say, well, you should go tell your sergeant or push your sergeant off of this person. But I find that, was there any training for that? I don't, because it's just like the military, very sort of command control, top down approach. I'm assuming it's similar, but I didn't know if that was something that you guys work on or talked about while you were going through it.
Back then in '97, no.
Yeah.
Now I believe there is. I believe that police departments are really pushing that narrative forward, that if you are seeing something that is not right, that you have to step up your game and vocalize, right? And you're seeing more and more instances of it, especially through social media. It is being highlighted, and it's not being highlighted by the police department. It's being highlighted by people in the community, which is also like, we have to understand that we're in a blip, right? We're in a timeline. We're a dot in a timeline, right, of forever, right? And so we have to understand that this is where technology is playing such a huge role, where you're getting so much information so fast that everybody has to kind of fine tune and catch up and understand what's going on. And that if there's going to be some major pivots in policing so that it could be accommodated for. But, I also think too that, like, sadly, those officers that were there, that were around, they were tone deaf, right? Like, how many times are you seeing these different videos right now where if I pull you over, you want to just sit there and argue with me from the minute, tell me that I don't have the right probable cause to pull you over. Like, everybody is a social media lawyer, right? Everybody. And look, here's the deal. I will never have a problem with anyone advocating for themselves.
Sure.
I think what people really need to understand is the most effective way to do that, right? And so it's like, I've worked locally with a local defense attorney. His name is Alton Edmond. Incredible man. And we sit there and we did a collaboration where we sat him down. He is literally the chairperson for the use of force committee for the Cocoa Police Department. So here he is sitting in a chair, and right next to him is the commander of the Community Services Unit for the Cocoa Police Department. So you would naturally think that they're adversaries, right? Yeah. And Alton Edmonds sitting there and he's saying, look, I'm not an adversary. I'm not against them. I'm against bad cops. Absolutely. And here's the deal. We have to get you, the public, the most precise information so that you can survive these instances. Because there's already layers built in there where you sitting there and arguing with them at the scene is causing an escalation. If they're trying to de-escalate and you're not complying, now they're ripping you out of a car or they're breaking your window, and now you just gave them license to put their hands on you. And the minute that you do that, we have no idea where it's going to go. It could go anywhere. Yeah. And so the question is, was it worth you standing there dying on the side of the road for? The answer is obviously going to be, with the value of life, like we talked about earlier, absolutely not. Were you right? Could you have been right in what you were saying? Absolutely. But we have to think about the greater end game versus that immediate gratification of, no, I'm not going to do that. The minute that you do that, even if you think that officer is wrong, even if the officer is wrong, and now you're in a scuffle, what does that ultimately lead to? And as a community, are we okay with that? No. Everybody's saying no. We want to put a value on that life. Okay, well, that takes two.
That's right.
Right? So
I love that you I think you kind of answered the Tyreek Hill question, because for me, if I'm getting pulled over, yes, the bias opinions of the social media effects that I think that, okay, I'm a black man, I might not make it, I might make it out of here. And so I'm trying to handle this situation and be as compliant and as polite that I can, so it'll give me the best chance to get home. And so, no matter how much I think I'm wrong, I'm right, whatever that police officer tells me to do, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be very polite doing it as well. And it's funny because Tyreek Hill, if you saw the clips, he wasn't like he was that person that was questioning, and he was being defiant to the point where he even apologized, which I really respect him for, as being a leader. He, after the incident, he actually said he could handle that situation a little differently.
Better.
How do you feel? How do you feel about that, John?
I think we can all say that, right? Nobody handles a situation perfect. You're a CEO of a company. There's no way you handle every single situation perfectly, and neither do I, right? And I think that once we start understanding that, first and foremost, there's always room for improvement. We can always do better. We can build off of that, right? That's a commonality that we can build off of. When it comes to Tyreek, could he have handled himself better? Absolutely. But I also understand, and could the officers have? Absolutely. They're both dealing with split-second decisions, right? The officers are making split-second decisions, but so did Tyreek Hill. He made a split-second decision to say, I'm going to talk this way. I'm going to act this way, or not, or I'm not going to say a word, or hurry up and give me my ticket, or whatever it is.
Right.
And
keep your window up.
That's it. Hey, listen. And are there people out there? Are there officers that handle that differently, better? Yeah, of course. Of course, because at the end result is, I think anyone that sees what happened, we can say that could be handled better.
Sure.
Okay? Just like anytime that I had to walk up on somebody because I had a description of a male black with glasses and a brown hat on with a beige polo. This is, in his late 40s, early 50s, and I come up and I run up on you. I don't want to tell you why I'm coming up on you because it says that you have a gun. But I come up on you and I put you up against the wall and I say to you, this is the description that I have, and you're going to sit there and you're going to argue with me because you think I'm profiling you. And I turn around and I frisk you for weapons to make sure that we are both safe. What I always did afterwards was I would sit there and explain to you why I did it. And then I would ask Central to literally give me that description back on the radio so that you can hear it. And so that I can point to, hey man, you're not wearing a black hat. You're not wearing a yellow hat. You're wearing a brown hat. And you got a beige shirt on just like it says. You know what I'm saying? Now, I understand that there's a lot of trauma in that. I understand that has been weaponized by police departments for generations. I acknowledge that, and I agree that has not been used to the best empathetic needs of a community, of any community that it's been used. But I can say that it has been extremely effective in getting guns off the street, getting drugs off the street, and getting people that should not be out victimizing communities behind bars. So I understand that there's a two-way street in that, but I always think that we can do it better. And the only way that we're going to do that is through reflection, right? We saw the incident happen. Everybody gives their opinion on it, right? Whether you validate that or I validate it or discredit it or whatever. We understand that everybody has a perspective. Yeah. How many of those perspectives are actually driven by someone else's experience? We could totally get in that, right? Yeah. Markel told me that the other day he was hanging out on the street and 5 cops ran up on him grabbed all the stuff out of his pocket, took his money, and ran off.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, were you there? Did you see it happen? No, I didn't see it happen. Markel's my boy. There's no way he would lie to me and tell me something different. All right, Jeff. Now, when I walk up to Jeff and I'm in uniform, Jeff is gonna, in his mind, yo, they're gonna rob me, bro. They just robbed Markel the other day. They're gonna rob me.
Right.
There's no validation in that. There was no, well, did that really happen? You know, it wouldn't be like it. Nobody has ever lied about anything, you know, in the world, right? Like, so is there different variances of the truth? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we can always take a look and say, in those interactions, if Markel had one bad interaction with officers, but it's flooded with 50 or 100 positive ones, maybe then it will open up the conversation so we can actually talk about that one negative one. And we can get to the root of that. And I can build trust with you so I can tell you that God forbid that happens again, or God forbid I'm the one that's coming up to you. That I'm not saying, hey, you get up on the wall. It's yo, Markel, do me a favor. Just show me your hands, turn around. I have to check you. I need you to trust me right now. Because I have this and I will explain it to you all when we're done. That's two totally different pathways.
Yeah, oh yeah. You know, it's interesting. You know, we talk about the empathy, right, and just being able to put yourself in the shoes of someone else and say, okay, for all of our safety, this is what we want to do. And I think at the end of the day, as a citizen, I just want to make sure that I get home safe to my family, and I want to make sure this police officer or this interaction that they get home safe to their family.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. Because it's like what happens is, I mean, an individual can have a bad day. There's a lot of power in policing. And so if I have a bad day and the police officer who's interacting with me is having a bad day, and now the escalation without an outside force to say, let's everybody calm
Chill
down.
out. Yeah.
Chill out. I just saw a video the other day of somebody being questioned and then being asked, and he was combative and didn't want to do it. And then his passenger, is recording everything. He's getting out of the car and he's talking to the police officers. And again, it's just getting escalated. The stress level, they're trying to get this guy under control, and this guy's yelling at them about how they're going to lose their jobs. And it's like, that's not helping.
No.
It's okay to record. I'm fine with that. But just step back and give space and let them do what they do. So it's tough. And I think ultimately, I don't know that the right answer, other than in my situation, and I know, Jeff, you can speak to this too. In my world, I'm nice. I got a smile on my face. Did I do something wrong? Please let me know. Oh, it's in a glove box. Can I grab it? Okay, great. Right. It's like, how do I make sure you feel comfortable? Regardless of me being a black man, I don't even think about that, to be honest. I just think I've seen plenty of folks that with the same color having issues and combating because it's trust. And so I just have a lot of respect for what you do. I have a lot of respect for how hard that job is. And like I said, at the end of the day, I just want to make sure I get home. If there's a conflict, handle it in court. Handle it in court. So I don't know. Jeff, any more questions just in and around?
I mean, I just want to just piggyback off what you said, Markel. Not everyone is like us. That's what we have to remember as well. And also, we have to keep this in
They should be,
mind.
by the way, Jeff. They should be. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Sorry.
I know. No, you're right. I feel the same way. But even though sometimes we give that good behavior, but some people, even with good behavior, experience a bad situation with the police officer.
Yep.
So we have to keep that in mind. So that's why I say I'm trying to give myself the best possible chance to get home. But you might experience that one bad cop that no matter what wants to give you a hard time. And we have to keep that in mind as well. And for John, it's all about, we can have these conversations, but we need to just talk about solutions. How can we make a difference? And I want to I want to jump into your Hey Blue, your organization,
Thank you.
about that because I think it's a good transition on what you're doing to combat those situations as well. So if you want to talk about Hey Blue a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you. So what we do at Hey Blue facilitates meaningful connections between police officers and the communities that they serve. So we're a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. I don't do this to make profit for myself in any way, shape, or form. But as I shared earlier, I saw that one-on-one personal connection saves lives. And that's what this is all about, right? And so how do we do that, right? And starting to work with police departments to start trying to facilitate these meaningful connections. Community members often don't even know that police departments are willing to do the work, right? So that's like the very first thing that we do is we try to engage the community to let them know that their police department is working with Hey Blue and that we together, if we're all going to work together to keep each other safe, that you have to understand that they're willing to sit at the table. And so we started it with what was deemed as very, it was deemed by the community as very low-hanging fruit, but it was actually, they realized how impactful it was. So I started with, I said, okay, how do I get police? This was, mind you, this was pre-George Floyd. So this is 2016 we started this. But it was, how do we start getting police officers to connect with the community on the most basic level, right? Because oftentimes it's all about enforcement, or it's all in ways in which police officers are kind of set up not to be uncomfortable. And if you look at it, some of those things are like coffee with a cop, or like, they'll do some kind of something along those lines, like a community sit-down meeting or something like that, right? And what I saw is that most of the times when you walk into a coffee with a cop, and I don't know if you've ever been to one, but the cops are all huddled by the coffee and they're all talking about when they had off or what they did or blah, 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 and how many overtime hours they did this year and blah, blah, blah. And I walked in and I'm like, so this is Coffee with a Cop, and this was here in Melbourne, Florida. I said, this is Coffee with a Cop? Okay. So, and people are walking in, they did it in a Wawa. And people are walking in and out of Wawa, and there's 8 cops sitting in the corner, and they're all sitting there eating donuts and drinking coffee. And I'm like, what is this crap? Like, if we're going to start building connection, we literally have to get put out there. So I created a very special story time. Okay. Now, everybody says police officers, yeah, they already come to the schools and they read books. No. What we do is in our events, all of our events, we make sure that the officers, they have to go a little bit more than that, right? So we started with a very special story time where we asked officers to go into Title I schools, right? Do you guys have Title I schools in Boston? Do you understand what that is? Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And so to go into the Title I pre-K and kindergarten classrooms and read books, sing songs, and have a party to be able to connect with the kids. And so it was very important when we walked into these rooms, we walked in with community members. So we partnered with our local Black student union at Florida Tech. Mm-hmm. And we said, all right, give us one student, give us one officer. We're going to sit down in this room and we're going to work to build connection with these kids. It's going to start by reading them books. The books that we're going to read, they're going to focus on empathy, love, connection, building self-confidence, right? And who's going to read that book? The officer. The officer literally reads a book called I Am Love. And one of the first things it says is I am empathy, right? And would the majority of people say that an officer is empathy? No. But can we sit there? Can we start changing that narrative? And if we're going to start changing that narrative, we have to let them start reading stuff that kind of, supports that, right? And so for a cop to stand there in a kindergarten classroom and he's talking about I am love, I am empathy. And here to my right, is a young student, a man of color from the Florida Tech's Black Student Union, and he's sitting there looking at this officer reading this book. We're humanizing, right? And then they're both understanding that officer is now seeing this young man of color. His name at the time was Latuan. You see Latuan sitting there, and Latuan's reading a book that's very, very similar. And now this officer is seeing this young man of color also as empathy, as love, as connection. And that they're getting that direct feedback from those kids, right? And then at the end of this entire experience, we all sit down, and there's like it's designed where the kids have an outpouring of affection. And the kids bum rush the officers, and they bum rush our student, right? Our Black Student Union, Latuan. And they're all over them. And the officers looking, and the officers break down, and they're getting all emotional. And they look to their right, and there's Latuan, and he's sitting there, and he's getting all emotional. Why? Because there's no greater, purer contact than an appreciation from a child to you about who you are and what you do. And then we turn around and we made it a point in those classrooms to share what Latuan does. He goes to Florida Tech. He is studying aviation. Do you know that you can do that too? And so that now, when you look at that officer's not looking at Latuan and saying, you know, the horrible things that he has been programmed through his PTSD mind and all the negative interactions about when he sees a young man or woman of color, about if they're an animal or they're a perp or whatever else horrible thing that they want to say. They turn around and they see, here's a positive member who the majority of the students in the Black Student Union Florida Tech are not from this area. They're from all over the country. So now here's a student that's not even from here, that's sitting in this classroom right now, helping you build connection with these kids in your community. That's an extremely powerful thing, and a tremendous amount to unpack and have conversations around. And so we started doing that live when COVID hit. We took it virtual, man. And when we took it virtual, we got 36 police departments in 15 states to jump on. And we were live streaming it into pre-K and kindergarten classrooms across the United States so that everybody can see that it's not just a police officer and it's not some BS. It's actually 100% valid and everybody's working towards the same goal. That actually got us recognition on NBC Nightly News, which was pretty cool. Nice. But then, you know, there's always going to be, just like in social media, anything else, there's going to be those naysayers, right? They say, hey, man, anybody can read a book to a kid. Okay, so then I'm going to ask you, if you're going to give me your opinion, I'm going to ask you to give me your solution too. Okay? So hey, listen, you want to give me that? Fine. How would you solve it? And they're like, well, these particular people were like, well, I consider myself a community leader. I would want to sit down with the police chief. And that's when George Floyd had happened. And obviously all the tensions are extremely high. And so we're like, all right, great. We're going to call it the Hey Blue Plate Special. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask a local chef to come in and cook a meal. And then we're all going to sit down around that meal. We're going to eat that meal. And we're going to start talking about police-community relations. I want to know your lived experience. Markel, you're sitting in this room. I want to know your lived experience. But here's the deal. If you're agreeing to be in this room, you're also agreeing not only to give us your lived experience, but you have to agree to start working on solutions together.
That's right.
Okay?
I love that. Yeah. Well, and I just wanted to say that, you know, you mentioned, well, anybody could read a book to a kid, but it's just not about, this isn't about anyone.
Right.
This is about the trust being built in the community between law enforcement and the citizens of the community. And so when you start to see somebody sit down with a child and read them things that are about empathy and about love and about caring for people and about raising up and looking after each other, the optics change, right? The psyche changes over time. So just like we can have a negative experience, 10 years policing a really difficult neighborhood, we can have a tremendous or a very positive experience because we spend 10 years reading the kids in a community, and that becomes the standard and the norm, and that changes lives.
Yeah.
20 years from now, that changes people and what they do. So,
and you know how I know it works? Check this out. Ready? You know how I know it works? It's very simple. First time we did the story time, kids loved it. Outpour of affection for the officers. It was great. Next time we go in, it was a different classroom that they walked into. Different classroom. And the kids that were sitting there started saying, hey, Officer Frank, are you going to read stories to us today? And is the what they call, is the pilot going to be here with you? Is the pilot here with you? Now, he was studying aviation mechanics. He wasn't studying to be a pilot. Yeah. But it's like, that is the change point, right? That is when other kids were telling these kids about this awesome story time that they were in, that Officer Frank did, and blah, blah, blah. And now, and they had this pilot come, and he was super cool. Did you know I could be a pilot too? And blah, blah, blah. And that's how we start changing in a long-term vision, how we start changing the way in which we interact with each other, so that later on, they are known to each other. That's Officer Frank. No, he's all right, man. He came to my class. He did this. He did that. And that is, the impact is huge on it.
That's huge.
And then at the Hey Blue Plate specials, we're sitting there and we're going, having these conversations, and we're talking, and people are like this one particular woman, she was like, you know, I hate what you guys do. This is, she talked to the police chief. I hate what you guys do with the homeless. All you guys do is arrest the homeless, blah, 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 this and that. And the chief was like, with all due respect, no, that's not what we do. And she's like, well, what are you talking about? This is what people are telling us, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, have you ever seen us arrest one of the unhoused people here? And she's like, no, I haven't. But this is what they're telling us. And she turns around and she's like, he says, well, as a matter of fact, we looked at that and we saw that we couldn't, like, that wasn't doing anything. Like that wasn't helping anyone. So we actually gathered a resource document. And every time our officers engage with someone that is unhoused, we offer them all of these resources. And she's like, you do? And he says, yeah. And he says, look, and he shows a page. Look at all these resources that are available. And she's like, wow, I didn't even know that. And he turns around and he's like, well, yeah. I said, well, and this is it. So, and this is the question. You didn't know about it, but these resources are out there. Chief, there's a disconnect, because the people that need the resources are not getting the information that they need to get to the resources. Right. So I have to ask you, sir, where are these resources like allocated? And he's like, well, every one of my officers have it, and it's on all of our social media and our website. And I said, all right, great. I said, so at the time, there was like 20-something people in the room. I said, please, everybody raise your hand if you've been on the police department website. And not one person raised their hand. I said, how about social media? Anybody here follow the Melbourne Police Department? The chief didn't even raise his hand. And I'm like, so the problem is a messaging problem. That's what we're talking about here. And so how do we start working effectively around solutions around the messaging of all of this? And so now I turn back to the woman and I say, ma'am, with all due respect, you, as a member of a community, you are now armed with something extremely powerful. You are now armed with knowledge. How are you going to allocate that knowledge so that nobody is like that? What they do is not misrepresented, because you have the knowledge now. And she said, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to post it everywhere that I interact with anyone that's unhoused. Fantastic. There you go.
There you go.
And now we went from problem to dispelling that problem to identifying what the true problem is towards a solution.
That's right.
All in the span of 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And so from there, so that's step 2, right? And then what we then ask the people that are in the room is we say, okay, so now you see that the police department's willing to connect. They're willing to be here. They're willing to have the conversations. They're willing to be very uncomfortable. They're willing to do that work. So now you're armed with that information. So now we're going to ask you to do this. We're going to ask you to go back into your community, and we're going to ask you to get 5 or 10 more people to be part of this conversation again. And we call it a design thinking session. We say, all right, come on back now. We started with 20 people. Let's get it to 75. And now let's start working on your lived experience, everybody's lived experience, and how do we start now pushing towards solutions together? Hey, chief, can we do this? Because a chief can sit there and promise you everything in the world. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, no problem. But the chief is sitting there spinning 97 different plates, right? He's got so much going on. And you don't know if he's going to have issues with the union if he tries to do this, or if he's going to have the issues with, I don't know, the city manager or whatever it is. So can we have those real conversations about what we can achieve, what is actually achievable, and the solutions to, the action items to get there. So all of that work, right? So story times, Haven Plate specials, design thinking sessions, they all lead into our mobile platform. And so we leave the mobile platform in the community for people to interact with it. And it's it's pretty simple. I want you to think of like everybody has some touch point or another with the game Pokemon Go, right? Everybody has either heard of it or played it or whatever, has a friend that plays it. So if we can imagine where a mobile platform that incentivizes the public to actually seek out police officers to simply say hello. That's it. Just say hello. It all starts with a hello, right? And when you do, the platform awards you points. And you can redeem those points for things that you need for your home. So think like food for your family. Think like diapers for your kids. Think like a car seat for your child, right? The police officers, and eventually, I want you to also think, for us adults in the room, think about using those points to pay down municipal penalties like parking tickets or moving violations, right? Because that's usually where we get hurt the most, right? Me, John Verdi, I get a moving violation, that hurts. Jeffrey, you get a moving violation, that might hurt a lot more because your income bracket might be different than mine, and that $250 fine is going to hurt you tremendously.
Absolutely.
And so if we can think about using points just by simply saying hello, and you can redeem those points for things that you need for your family, and or to help pay down municipal penalties. And then you think about the officers that participate, they get points too, but all of their points have to be allocated to a local beneficiary in the community in which they serve. So think of a local 501c3 or a local family in need through a mentor-mentee program like Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Bigs with Badges program. Now you're talking about the more that people are approaching me, and I'm making myself available in the community, and people are walking up to me, they're saying hello, we're having all these positive connections, and then you're literally helping me help a family in my community. Like, think about that impact and how it becomes full circle, and how now we as a community are all working together to help keep each other safe. And we're helping to support the people that need the support the most. And now you're changing my job description as an officer from somebody that just strictly enforces laws to someone that is seen as a connector and as a resource and as a builder of community. And now that's when we all tie it back to our earlier conversation about what makes a good officer. What are those metrics? And now we can imagine we can turn around and say, that's Officer John. He's had 27,000 positive connections with members of his community over the past 6 months. And that has led to this family getting these resources, or this 501c3 getting these resources so they can help the same community that he's in.
Yeah.
That is impact upon impact upon
Data.
impact.
Chasing impact.
Yes, sir. Hashtag chasing impact, like my man Jeffrey says. That's right.
Yeah.
So
listen, I got it. There's two more in that I'd love to get you to talk about. Your 21 question podcast.
Yes, sir.
We need to hear about that a little bit. If you can just dive into that just a little bit.
Sure. So, when we're also interacting with the community, we're also obviously understanding that the most vulnerable age of, if we're going to see true growth between who actually interacts with the police department the most, it's men and women ages 13 to 17, right? It's actually 13 to 24, but 13 to 17 is like the sweet spot. And so we said, and community members said, you can't start talking about solutions in the community if you're not going to bring this group of young men and women into the conversation. So we started doing that. Hey, man, how do I get you into this room to have these conversations? And how do I make you care about this? Right? That's the ultimate thing. These kids these days, if it's not Snapchatting about their friends or this and that, or the latest thing about what's going on reality TV, whatever, they don't care. And it's like, how do we start making you care? The only time that you care is when something really bad happens and people are basically telling you to care. Well, what if we start sharing with you the reasons why you should care now, right now, age 13? And so when we started having those conversations with students, they turned around and they said, I don't even understand a cop. I don't even understand like what makes them tick. Why would you even want to do this? And one of the kids said something that was so profound that it always resonates with me. And they said, young lady, she said, you're tasked. You take on a job of putting your life on the line for me. How do you do that when you don't even know me? And why should I even care about? I don't even know you. You're going to put your life on line for somebody you don't even. That sounds stupid. It sounds ludicrous. And I said, so what I'm hearing you saying is you really need to know the people in your community that police you. Because the minute that you start doing that, at the bare minimum, maybe you made a new friend or a mentor. But on your worst day, maybe we just created that extra split second that we were talking about earlier.
That's right. That's right.
So I said, what would get you to care? And they said, well, I think we should start asking them questions. All right. I said, so if I get you officers to ask questions too, you'd ask them questions? And she was like, absolutely. And this was the student at the time, young woman, very, very social justice minded, anti-police, just like I don't want to know. All I see is my black and brown men and women getting hurt, generationally, trauma, all that kind of stuff. And when we started talking to her and started saying like, hey, well, if you want to be part of the solution, could we start thinking about it this way? And she was just like, absolutely. I have so many questions. And so one of the first guys we brought on was this incredible corporal in the South Hill, Virginia Police Department. His name is Corporal Brandon Fleming. And Corporal Brandon Fleming received national notoriety because he came to a scene and there was a whole bunch of young girls of color playing with dolls and stuff like that. And there was all this stuff going on. And he happens to be a white officer. And he literally laid down on the floor and was playing with them, with the dolls and everything, and talking with them and interacting and building connection with them. And when we spoke to him, we saw that it was not BS. Like this is his jam. Like he loves interacting with kids and being that guy in his community. And so we're like, all right, dude, would you be willing to jump on and answer some questions from this student? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. First question they asked him, what do you think about Black Lives Matter? As a white cop, what do you think about Black Lives Matter? And you just see him go, Who? And here's the deal. We told him, we are not letting you know. We are not telling you what these questions are.
Yeah.
We are not telling you. And he was like,
Okay.
and you know how hard it is to get an officer to agree to be on a show, and it was live, by the way. It was a live show talking about, tell us about Black Lives Matter and what you feel about it. And he was like, his answer was the most honest answer I've ever heard. He said, you know, as a white cop, I thought that I thought what I heard is that they just wanted me dead. Like they're not about me. They're about killing me. Pigs, kill the pigs, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, and I took a minute and I said, that can't be. So I went on their website and I started researching them to fully understand. Now, right there, that's a growth mindset.
Yes.
Right. You're not in survival mode. You're not in an emotional mode, because he was in it when he heard. When he heard, kill the pigs, blah, 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 his emotions took over. And then he sat about it, he breathed on it, and he said, I want to get to know what these people are really saying. And when he went on the website, he's like, well, what they're saying is pretty much the same thing that I'm saying, which is they don't like bad cops. They want to get rid of bad cops. And they want people of color to be treated equitably and fairly. Yes. And who can honestly be against that? Like, seriously.
Right.
In his mind, obviously we know that in the greater conversation, sadly, there are people that, but he's like, so he's like, I realized that I'm not against that premise.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I support that 100%. I work with men and women of color on my police department. He's like, and their lives do matter. Mm-hmm. He's like, so to him, it was a very, very honest conversation that he had, and it was incredible. And then we sought other officers out from across the United States that were similar in their approach to policing, like Corporal Fleming. And we came across this gentleman, an incredible man. His name is Officer Jeremy Bohannon of the Austin, Texas Police Department. He's a man of color. He is 100% about building connection in his community. Mm-hmm. He's all about it. And we met him and we said to him, hey, man, we'd love to have you question you on 21 questions. He says, absolutely. And he comes on. He did not come on as a representative of Austin, Texas Police Department. He came on, as himself. But she asked him the same question. And his response was, look, at first, I felt a lot like Corporal Fleming did. But then I started realizing that they just want, like he said, everybody to be treated fairly. And how could I be against that? I'm 100% for that. He's like, what I think they fall short is everybody being treated fairly has to include me as a black man in a uniform.
Mm. Yep.
So that has to be prioritized as well. And what makes now Detective Jeremy Bohannon so absolutely incredible is that during the George Floyd protests in Austin, they ordered him to work, obviously, and he was working and he was there trying to help secure the Austin community.
Yep.
And when he was off, he went home. He changed into his regular clothes and he went back to start facilitating these conversations between the officers that he knew there and the protesters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I am doing this work now for quite some time. I have yet to hear of anyone that did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how incredible he was. So 21 questions was specifically created to start having those conversations so that these young high school students can understand the mindset of an officer, what's going on, what their background is, all that kind of stuff, so they can simply get to know them and know that these officers are they're growing in popularity in the type of officers that they are.
Yeah.
Meaning the ones that become officers that build connection in their communities. That's growing across police departments across the United States.
Yeah.
John, I wanted to highlight real quick, just something that you were talking about as we talk about Black Lives Matter. The messaging is so important, or lack thereof, right? And so, like, when I think of Black Lives Matter, like, I looked at it as two different things. There's Black Lives Matter, the organization that is out there doing things and organizing this and organizing protests and getting people going and riled up and all that. And then there's just the concept, Black Lives Matter, because traditionally in the country, African Americans felt like, hey, we don't seem to matter. When it comes to policy, when it comes to all these things, it doesn't seem to matter. And so those are different things to me. And so there's things that Black Lives Matter, the organization, has said or done or preached that I'm like, I don't agree with that at all. Right. And I think that's really divisive and very negative. Versus, hey, we just want you, just like our boys in blue, men and women in blue, we want to feel the same way about us as Black Americans, just like anybody else that are in this big melting pot that we call the United States of America. And so the messaging is important because, politics and media gets involved. And I will say the same thing about defund the police. And defund the police, to me, it's very negative to say that. But somebody might actually mean, well, look, let's allocate resources separately or differently so that we don't need the police to do this, 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 and this. So that we don't need that interaction, right? And so that's different than somebody screaming, literally, we don't want you having anything. We don't need you to have the resources you need or anything like that. And then now we have lack of resources in certain communities. And crime goes up, and it's a problem. So I think that's just noting to everybody that when we say these things and we get the buzzwords off the news and things like that, we have to be careful with the perception of what that actually means. And so when we say defund, I'm not talking about not having officers or having, giving them less money. We just mean, hey, let's allocate this a little bit differently, so that we can maybe limit interactions that don't need to happen until we can we can get Hey Blue on board and say, hey, let's get this going, right? Let's build this community and build trust.
So
we're going to reiterate that.
So, couple things on what you said. The first thing is we have to remember the timeline for when 21 Questions happened to when the Black Lives Matter movement was pushing along, right? And so it was still kind of fresh. So we have the opportunity to reflect now to see like what has gone on with their organization and all that kind of stuff, whether we agree or disagree. But at the heart, the premise of it, that's why the officers kept saying, white, black, and different. I agree with this. I agree with the statement. I agree with the mission, the overall arching mission of, yes, absolutely, men and women of color should be treated equally and fairly, across the board. And we should get to a point where we can do that. And that their lives do need to matter. Everything else, I stay out of that out of that realm. Okay. But when it comes to what you said about like defund and all that kind of stuff, I think that where people's minds at, I think they're 20 steps ahead and they realize that everything else is 30 steps back. Meaning like defund the police. I did not meet one officer that disagreed with the premise of defunding the police. Not the words, not the hashtag, but the premise of, hey man, society asks a lot of us. They ask us to be social workers. They ask us to be, mental health people. They ask us to be so many other things than just enforcing a law or the laws that, yeah, a lot of that should not be on our plate. It should be with other people that have specialized training in that. We absolutely 100% agree on that, without a doubt. But what they say is this: even to enforce the laws, we are still currently underfunded. So if you're going to defund us more and you're going to swing those funds somewhere else, you didn't set up the infrastructure correctly to be able to do that. Right. Now imagine they turn around and let's just say here in Cocoa, they turn around and they want, not that they don't have it already, but they want to have like an expanded CRT team, right? They want to have a crisis intervention team, or a crisis response team, right? And so they want to expand it. And so now imagine that instead of defunding the Cocoa Police Department, if we just asked you to approach those officers and simply say hello to them, and then now we can allocate those point resources to be able to fund that CRT team.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're not defunding anything. We're actually keeping that the way it is. But now we're listening to the needs of our community, and they're saying we need more crisis response people. Okay, Hey Blue will allocate the funds to that so that we can get that in this community. And the way that we are built, everything breaks down into a zip code, to your individual zip code, those positive interactions in your zip code. So we can allocate those resources. We can make those 501c3s, those not-for-profits, those grassroots not-for-profits. We can allocate money to them so that they can support from within and grow that seed into a beautiful symbiotic relationship where everybody is working together. And you don't have to worry about defunding because we're funding it through another way.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. As we look to land the plane here, and this has just been an amazing conversation.
Thank you.
I wanted to make sure we had a chance to talk about the school.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, you're doing a lot of stuff, my friend. And
Yeah.
I am.
we absolutely love this.
Podcast.
Yeah, we'll have you on again.
Yeah, we can totally do that and have my wife come on. I'll give you the 30,000-foot view on the school. But so basically, very long story short, I have two children. I have a 14-year-old son. I have a 10-year-old daughter. My 14-year-old son, we went to chase my wife's dream of becoming a veterinarian when my son was very young. And that journey brought us to live out of country in New Zealand. Okay. And I put my son in their learning environment at a young age in New Zealand, and he learned how to learn there. And their environment there is totally different than it is here. Everything is centered through play, through a lot of asking questions of the educators that are there, from the kids, like building the communication, building the trust. And so when we came back to the United States, and we had to come back because sadly my wife fell ill, we put my son in a traditional learning environment that was considered one of the best learning environments in the United States, in New Jersey. And when we did that, second month in, his educator comes to us like a month and a half in, when you have the first parent-teacher night, they turn around and they tell us that we have to medicate our son because he won't sit down and shut up. And I turned to the educator and I said, well, what exactly is he doing? And she's like, well, every time I try to read a book, he tries to sit on my lap and he tries to ask me questions about what he sees. And I'm like, yeah, that's an inquisitive young man. Yeah, absolutely. That's how he learned how to learn. Yeah. And she's like, yeah, but he needs to sit down and shut up because he's monopolizing all of my time. Mm-hmm. And we're like, well, no. I'm not gonna squish. I'm not gonna depress my son's quest for learning because you don't want to allocate enough time or resources to that. So we wind up moving to where we are in Florida because we were under the impression that we were going to homeschool our children. And when we started going down that journey, we actually asked actually from across the United States, we asked educators to come and sit down and talk with my son. So at the time, he's about 5 now, five and a half. Mm-hmm. Because I understood this. Jeffrey, Markel, you learn a certain way. You learn a certain way. I learn totally different than that way. We might have similarities, but I learned totally different. My son, he's on a whole other level. Mm-hmm. And I said, I need to figure out the best ways to engage with him and to interact with him so that he can learn in his best way. So when we did that, they said, well, your son is a tangible learner. He learns by doing things with his hands. We said, okay. And they said they also found out that he also loves gardening, right? So we're like, all right. And at the time where we were living in an apartment. So like there's no gardening in an apartment, right? Like no shot. So what we said is, for our son, we're going to create a community garden. Okay, and this actually happened on 9/11, 2016 is when it happened. We created a community garden here. And when we did, we put a call out and we said, hey, we're starting this community garden, 9/11, obviously you know why 9/11, right? And so, and 75 people showed up that day. And everybody brought something, whether it was sugar cane, whether it was, Bolivian sunflower, whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
But what the greatest thing that they brought was knowledge, right? And they started talking about the concept of permaculture. I don't know if you ever heard of it before. I don't know if you guys are into growing anything, but basically, if you wanted to grow something that bears fruit, like papaya or whatever it is, in order for you to do that, you don't just plant papaya seeds and give it some water and be like, "Come on, dude, let's go." You actually have to plant things around it that will support the growth of that and change the nutrients of that soil to help it grow. Well, that's a great, what do they call that? A great example of how a child learns, right? A child doesn't learn by just pelting them with the same information over and over again, because they might memorize it, but they're going to forget it. But if you turn around and you surround them with the experiences and you surround them with a community that grows with them, well, the learning is going to happen exponentially. And we saw that because all the people that were there that were sharing their permaculture knowledge, with my son literally getting his hands dirty every single day, he was able to regurgitate these concepts that were insane, and learning about the different names of the plants and all that kind of stuff, scientific names, all that stuff. So what we turned around and we said was, holy crap, if we can actually build a curriculum around this concept, this would really take off. And so we did. We built the curriculum. We started with 4 kids. We called it Urban Farm Labs.
Wow.
And we started on Saturdays with 4 kids. And quickly, within 6 months, it grew to over 85 kids.
Wow.
And so we were like, hey, man, we got to really create a school around this. So that's what we did.
Awesome.
And so our school is extremely unique in that it's place-based, project-based, social, emotional-based, like urban farm school. So everything is grown through everything is taught through the growing of an urban garden. And so, but I also understand that there's we could be on this for hours, bro, because there's been so many nuances of how we came into a community. This community was full of drugs and prostitutes that were walking the streets during the day. And when we came in, started a community garden, started the school, guess what? Crime went down. Crime went down over 80%.
Wow.
80%.
80%. And so what we started doing is we started using the community as a campus, and the kids were walking into the business district that was here. And any of these stores that don't open up till 4 or 5 o'clock at night, we started using those spaces during the day so that the kids can learn why that person opened their doors, and why did they choose this community? What has been the impact of their business in this community? They've been learning their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s through the garden, through all of these different touch points with the community, so that now the community has built enough trust in us to know that we are part of the community, that all these kids want to build the community, and that we were able to do that effectively together.
That's amazing. I got to applaud you on that one.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's impressive. I don't know that I've seen stats like that based on that, and I love it came from just such a personal place to solve that problem, and then it just carries over to a community, and that's what this is all about. Jeff, do you have any other questions on your end?
I just want to listen. I want to reflect on this whole conversation that we've had. What I really love, what we have done, was we talked about solutions, and it wasn't just talking and negatively and complaining. It was really about us, inviting information to like, how can we solve this? When I reflect back on, I want to include you guys on this reflection, is with the George Floyd incident. What really stood out to me overall is that you always hear about, Black people, people of color complaining, and really talking about what's been happening to them with the police. And, you know, it seems like it gets, because it's so much, it's because it's just Black people complaining, the country's not listening. But for some reason, when everyone, the whole entire world, saw what happened in that George Floyd incident, it seemed like it didn't matter. It seemed like everyone from any race, police officers, everyone came together, and organizations really started coming out the woodwork, like P4P, to start trying to fix and solve these issues that are going on. And that is encouraging for me, because it's not just one race talking about certain things. It's our overall United States, the world are joining in now. The eyes are open, and I'm just encouraged, because it's not just a Black problem, it's a we problem. And so I just wanted to end, my reflection on that, and invite you guys, if you're willing to chime in. But that's what I got out of it when we having these discussions. Solutions.
It absolutely is a we problem. And, I think the public, they want answers now and they want action now. And sadly, like, the institution of policing doesn't move fast, right? And even if it wanted to move fast, there's always some kind of hurdle, whether it's political, whether it's defunding. Like, there's so many different things that kind of get in the way. And we also found that you can have a chief with the greatest intentions in the world and want to drive all this change, and he'll be gone tomorrow. And the next chief will have a totally different view on that police department and what that police department needs and what that community needs. And so that's why, Hey Blue, we look towards the actual police officers to start building them, because they're the ones that are going to be there for the long haul. And we partner with other organizations like New Blue, who literally like finds those change maker officers in police departments that you would never think. And they're working so hard to try to identify these officers and get them the supports that they need to be able to drive those changes internally in those police departments. Or the Solutions Lab with Dr. Kyle Dobson. This man, he literally researches, he's a man of color who literally researches the interactions that police officers and the community members have to try to find pathways to make it so that they're more amenable to work together. And he actually, if you guys have a minute, if your listeners have a minute to check him out, he did a study where they literally asked an officer to go out into the community and say to a kid as he's walking in the park, "Hey kid, come here, I want to talk to you." And 9 times out of 10, that kid bolted. Right? And then he changed 10 words and he said, hey, I just want to let you know I'm out here in the community and I'm here. I'm willing to help. And, is there any way that I could be helpful to you? And the majority of the people that he polled stayed there and sat there and talked to him. That's huge. And all we did was change literally a sentence, right? So, like, people need to know that there are a lot of people, like society needs to know there are a lot of people like me, like you, Jeff, that are working towards solutions.
Yes.
That there are people that are sitting there and they're trying to figure it out. And they're not coming, you can't come from this saying, I have a list of demands.
Yes.
A list of demands, doesn't really get you far. But if you sit there and you say, I want to work towards a list of solutions that we can make actionable together, there's not one police chief in the United States that would say no. And if they did, they're probably not going to be a police chief for much longer.
Yeah.
So we are, it is an us problem, but people need to know that there are people And there are police departments that are willing to do that work. We just have to come to it.
And they need, and I think to your point, even the stats regarding the school, any sort of those positive things, like, sprouting off from the rooftops, right? Like, we get new things, you hear new things. We want to know about those things. We want to share with our audience because we need this. People need to see the wins.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you said, there's so much negativity out there with so many different things and pulling their attention. We want to make sure, to your point, John, that the community knows, hey, this has happened. This is positive. People out here with solutions, and we are winning. We showing the wins. That's important because that brings the energy. That brings excitement. That, hey, we can go out and make a difference. I had this not to bring it about politics, but we had a really difficult political climate for a lot of folks, and my whole thing was, okay, we vote and we do the best we can with the information we have, and if the wind blows the way that is not for you or happy for you, that's okay, because we're all still in this together and we're all still trying to solve things. So let's focus on the things we can control, and that might mean, hey, let's go out and start a program. Let's go help a child in your area, because there's no shortage of people that need help. And we can do that, and we can control that and feel good about it and share it and encourage more people to do it. So.
Oh my God, but you just struck a chord in my head. Like, think about this. And listen to your audience. Like, I literally, whoever's listening to this right now, I want you to think about this. What if, as a solution, we turn around and we said to a police department, any police department, anywhere in the United States, we say to them, hey, we think it's extremely important that you partner with Big Brothers Big Sisters, the Bigs with Badges program. Why? Because the statistics literally show that when you have mentors in the community in any inner city, that obviously a lot of positive things come out of it, right? You can look up, there's a litany of positive statistics that come out of it. But at the end of the day, officers will tell you anecdotal stories about how they have been mentors in the community in which they serve. And that has helped them internally. That has filled their cup. That has helped them say, hey, I remember when such and such was 5, and now I mentored him, and now he's a productive member of society. Or maybe he's even an officer, or maybe he's doing this, or maybe he's doing that. So now imagine if we went back. I know you guys work with the Boston Police Department a lot. Imagine we turned around and we said to the Boston Police Department, consider this. Consider every single police officer that you hire from 2028 on not only signs on to be a police officer with the police officer duties, but it's a must. They must also sign up to be a mentor in the community in which they serve. Do you understand that simple thing? And the police, we've shown that it actually behooves the police department to actually pay for that. Pay for the officers while the officers are in uniform to go to the schools and interact with those kids and be mentors to those kids in their police uniforms, right? Pay them to do it. Pay them an hour to do it, because they only have to do 4 hours a month, right? Pay them an hour in uniform and 3 hours outside of uniform, right? Where they don't get paid, but 1 hour they get paid. Do you understand the impact that would have? And do you understand the even greater impact when we would be able to turn around and say to your community, hey, these are guys, men and women, they want to be part of the community. Here they are. They're mentors in the community. And it's not through us. It's through another organization that monitors everything. They'll tell you the impact. We won't. They'll show you the impact. Can you imagine if that happened? The change that would bring alone?
Yeah, right.
That's one solution that is actionable in the near future that we can do.
That's right.
You just gave me an idea.
And that's not a you, Jeffrey. That's not a you, me, Markel solution.
Yeah.
That's a we solution.
A we solution. Hashtag,
So,
write that one down, Jeff.
Hashtag we solution.
We solution. We give Mr. Verdi all the credit, but we will use that one now. We will use that again.
Yes,
All right,
we will use that again.
Well, listen, well, John, folks that want to donate, folks that want to support you, where do they find you? How do they?
Yeah.
What's the best channels that you like to drive folks to?
Please, I appreciate everyone taking the time to even just give us a look. It's www.heyblue.us, right? It's about us. It's about all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So heyblue.us, and you'll see all of our, the majority of our past work. You'll see design thinking sessions. You'll see a timeline, but there's also a big donate now button. So we would really appreciate the donations because. Yes, none of the donations, honestly, none of the donations go into my pocket. We are fully transparent on that. I do this because at 9/11, this is a God's honest true story. I was trapped under a car, and as the buildings were coming down and all that kind of stuff, I had when all the rubble went past, I turned around and I literally said, "Lord, if you allow me to survive this, I swear to you with all my being that I'll do something greater than myself." And so that is why I do what I do. I don't do it for any financial gain. I do it because I just want that split second. I want people to know that we can do this, that we can do it together.
This is awesome.
That's outstanding, man, and really appreciate it, and thank you for sharing that with us and our audience here. And
thank you,
everybody. Check out Hey Blue, and we'll put the links and everything at the bottom here I think it'll be at the bottom here on our channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support us, and all the great work that's being done, and we want to bring these stories to you. Because that's that it starts there. Like I said, it's a we problem, it's an us problem, and us solutions, and so we all have to find a way to contribute and give back. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, John Verdi, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you both.
Man, thank you, John. True hero, man.
Thank you, man.